Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Spot the Aussie here, your favorite NRL fantasy coach, doing the NRL round by round fantasy analysis for you guys on a YouTube series back to back weeks. If you're liking this series thus far, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to give this video a like if you're liking the content and maybe you found it a little bit useful. But we've had a really great week, at least for myself. Round 6 was a big one. All my guns decided to fire, which is always a good thing, because when your guns don't fire, then you're going to be scrapping for your team to do well enough in order to get yourself in the top 1,000. Luckily for me, I got 923 points, which was the 1,567th highest score this round, blah, of 90,000 coaches. And that's because, you know, a couple of things went my way. I decided to captain James Graham, and that's probably a big question that a lot of people have had in the past, is who do you decide your captain is? Now, if you've broken rule number 1 of NRL Fantasy, which is picking Cameron Smith, then you've probably broken rule number 2, which is captaining Cameron Smith if you have him. Now that I don't have him, it's a bit more like Captain Roulette, because at the end of the day, had I have captained Karen McInnes, who I, you know, captained one game after the other, then I would have been doubling my score of 44, which he didn't do that great of a job, rather than James Graham, who got 67 and got 12th overall for that round, as you can see there. So why did I pick James Graham? I made a conscious decision to have a look at who was playing who that week. And if we go back that week, one thing that I noticed is that James Graham was going to be playing the Knights. Bulldogs were playing the Knights. We were forecast for a bit of rain. In the prior week, and what we know from James Graham in the last couple of years, is that when he plays in the rain, he plays astronomically better, because he doesn't get as fatigued in the rain as most forwards would do. And that's just common sense. So he gets to play a little bit more game time, where usually he gets puffed out and then dragged off the field, more or less because he's too tired, not necessarily because he wants to keep going on. The week prior, he ended up scoring, I think, a 71. He did a great job for us. Again, this week, doubling the score. Now, it didn't rain, but he did play Newcastle. The other thing that I also liked, and why I captained him, is because Frawley was playing on the bench as a utility. Usually the Bulldogs stack their forwards, 4 forwards on the bench, and therefore the forward rotation naturally gets less minutes. And even if there's an injury of one of the forwards, that means you're not necessarily going to get the minutes that you would usually get if there was an injury when you had a utility. So the moment that a utility got named, Frawley, I thought, you know what, James Graham is more than likely going to get more minutes than he has previously. And that was really the difference. An extra, you know, 10, 15 minutes can be the difference between getting a couple of more tackles under your sleeve, a couple of more runs. So I like to play the game where I'm playing guys who are playing more minutes than less minutes. I mean, that's a bit of common sense, but there are some guys who have higher, you know, points per minute, like your Paul Vaughan. We discussed him last week. Why I picked him up is because he's playing more minutes than he had ever done in Canberra Raiders, which meant that his natural score or average was going to be lower, and so far he's doing a great job for us. Other picks, Karl Lawton. Wow. Now, that was one of the things I spoke about last week. I gave you guys a bit of an inside tip. I said, look, if Karl Lawton goes to the hooker role, I'm going to play him. You know, I played him in the prior week when he was off utility on the bench in the center spot, because I love to play forwards and second rollers in place of my back line. If I could replace all my centers and wingers with forwards and second rollers who are just going to get defensive stats of tackles and hit-ups, then I'd do that 9 times out of 10, because they're never going to have a quiet game, which is what happened in the sake of Valentine Holmes. Holmes played in the wet. Look, he didn't play that great. It was an odd game to watch. If you watched the game on Sunday, Melbourne played Storm and it was torrential rain. Melbourne played Storm. No, I meant Melbourne played the Sharks. Melbourne played the Sharks. And what ended up happening was, every time that the Sharks weren't completing their sets, so that meant less running time for the back line for them to spread it out. But the other thing was that they were giving away a lot of penalties when the Melbourne were in their own 20. And what that necessarily meant was that the Melbourne players weren't pleading their sets in their own 50 and then kicking to the fullback, Valentine Holmes, and then Holmes doing about 10 to 20 meters of a run from the line, and then possibly, you know, getting on the outskirts of someone and getting a tackle bust. Instead, what was happening a lot of the times, he was getting the ball and people were up in front of him, because he never got a chance where, you know, the Sharks were necessarily defending that well to keep him in their own half. So that's why Valentine Holmes had a really poor game. He also made a couple of mistakes, dropped balls when they were sitting ducks, when he didn't have any pressure. Little things like that I'm not too worried about, because backline players will not generally score well in the wet. I know he's going to bounce back. He was my pickup last week. Didn't do that great of a job. who are the Sharks playing this week? The Sharks are playing Penrith, you know, so I expect them to get a lot more ball in freer space. And when you put a fullback with Valentine Holmes in free space, that's, you know, that's a good thing for me. But yeah, Karl Lawton ended up doing a great job. Unfortunately, Pete's looks like he is back. And that was one of the questions I got from someone was, is Karl Lawton, you know, worth picking up? And my answer is, at the moment, no, because he's named at 14th. And being a utility player, if you look at his prior scores, 21 and 9 and, you know, effectively 5, you don't want Karl Lawton if he's going to be coming off the bench. Wow, I just reset my monitor right there. But you do not want Karl Lawton coming off the bench because utility guys aren't going to be doing that great. You don't know when they're going to come on. They could come on for the last 20 minutes and do absolutely nothing. I'd rather have the center on there who's going to be playing 80 minutes and get the job done for me there. So at the moment, it's going to be a last minute call. What I've done here is I've done an interesting trade. I've traded Talakai into Idris, and I'm playing Idris over Lawton. But here's the thing. And just in case, if Lawton gets moved down into the starting hooker role because Pates is not right just yet on the Friday, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse the trade from Talakai to Idris and play Lawton in the center. And I'm going to be able to do that. Well, I might not be able to do that because Friday at 4 o'clock South play Bulldogs, but I'll be able to work it out. We'll get a better idea by Pete's by the Friday, hopefully, and someone will be able to have like a Wacko's Whisper or some sort of Twitter account where I know what's going on so I can make that play, or even play Nick Kotrick in there instead. But the idea here is that I want Lawton to play center if he's going to be in the starting hooker role. He'll make a little bit money for me off utility, but I don't want to be sacrificing points where I'm going to have to be playing him. I also like Nick Kotrick, but I don't like him enough to be playing him. He played really well in the last 2 games. He played like a freak. You know, he had 2 really good runs that, you know, bumped up his score dramatically. But without those, he was par below 20. And you got to remember with the Raiders team, they're going to the right side every time, which is the Rapana wing. You know, Jordan Rapana and Joey Leilua. So I'm not a big fan of Nick Kotrick in the long run. I think he's great for now. I think a lot of people have been pretty lucky with his last 2 scores being 59 and 41 respectively, but so be it. The other thing is Ben Hampton, and that was a question that I have received. Sickett actually asked me, will Hampton be able to keep his score up from round 6, which he got 54, which is actually a really great score for Hampton. Now, the funny thing about Hampton is that he's now going to the halves. I didn't want him to do that. I'd rather Hampton play 50 minutes at hooker than play 80 minutes at half. And there's going to be a big debate about that. That's because I love when my front rowers or front line or second rowers, my front pack are playing in my back line because I know they're going to be getting good defensive stats and it's going to be consistent. When they play in the halves, as you can see, Corey Norman, who I've got him paired with, he got 23. And that's just going to be luck of the draw with your halves, is that sometimes they're not going to necessarily get the ball as much or be putting, you know, people into plays, and they won't get the tackles that they get right on the edge that they would get if they're in the middle. So will Hampton be able to keep those scores? You've got to remember, he has played half for the Melbourne Storm quite a while ago, and I believe it was because Cooper Cronk was out back in 2015, but he also played in 2014. But let's just go off 2015. 2015 was an interesting time for Hampton because he came in, he was playing utility at the time, came in for Cooper Cronk. He ended up getting 3 scores. 56, 22, and 42 respectively, averaging him out to about 40 flat. That's good. That's really good. For a guy that's worth $167,000, do I think he's going to be able to maintain that with the Cowboys? I actually do. Even though I preferred him to play hooker, I actually think Hampton is going to be doing well in that position for the 80 minutes because of 2 things. Ben Hampton's probably going to be taking over the kicking role because Morgan usually does less than 100 a game. So they're probably going to be looking for Hampton every, time they get to the 5th and need a long kick downtown, which is naturally going to give Hampton a lot more points. Thurston, who's the ball playing, half out of the 2 of Morgan, you think that Hampton might take over that role to some degree. He's also got a lot of good edge players around him at the moment as well. Hess is going to be playing and starting on the edge, which means if Hampton is feeding off Hess, which can sometimes get line break assist or line breaks and then therefore line break assist for Hampton, we might see a repeated score. What I can tell you is that I highly expect Hampton to do better than 20.5, which is his average right now. So I would be banking on Hampton to do well. I think he's a must trade at the moment, just because Jake Granville at the moment has a cloud over his head where he's going to be back between round 9 and 11. So does Thurston. It's like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. But if you pick him up now, with a break even of -3, and the fact that he's probably going to play 4 to 3 games this week, usually means that he's going to be getting, you know, a possible 100k, and that's going to be a really good cash cow for you guys to pick up. I'm also playing him. I've got Riley Jackson, Kane Elgie, but I'm actually going to be playing Ben Hampton over those two because I think he can get the job done for me. So it's a yes from me for now. Another big question I got for the week from Code Delta was about Lolo. He wants to know, can I ignore him? I want to pick him up. You know, he's very good. He's doing a great job for his team so far, but he's doing it off the back of injuries. Now, the fact is, Fencer got injured last round in the first, you know, couple of minutes, so we know that Lolo got some more minutes there. The other thing was Blake Leary was playing utility hooker, so you really only had 2 forwards on the bench to interchange. So Lolo ends up playing 80 minutes and therefore getting 88 points. When he played his usual minutes of 57 minutes against the Rabbitohs, he scores 56. The first two games in the year that he played, he scored, you know, 62 and 78. Again, of increased minutes due to injury. What is that telling us is that Lolo's score at the moment is probably a little bit higher than what it should be projected. Now, you've got to remember, last year when Lolo played in the lock position, which he did all year, he averages 49.42. But he also has this weird thing where he can score exceedingly really high, like he did against the Seagulls in round 16, getting 81 points, but also scoring as low as in the 30s. So he's going to be one of those guys who I think a lot of people are going to try to pick him up this round just because he's doing such a great job. In fact, I know quite a few people actually captain him. The owners that have him actually captain him. 30% ownership is huge. My advice to you is this. If you have a gun, don't trade to Lolo because he's peaked. If you have James Graham or Paul Vaughan, you're like, well, Jason Taumalolo is doing a much better job. We need to trade him in. Wrong. Don't do it because you'll regret it the moment that those two guys outscore Jason Taumalolo or whoever you decide to bring in. You've got to go against that little niggle that you've got in the back of your head. The other thing is, the only way I'd consider him is if you had cash and you had a mid-tier player or a Cashie who you're upgrading into a gun. I think Jason Taumalolo would be a great asset to your team. Indefinitely. More guns the better if you've got the cash to do it. But I don't think you should be trading a gun to a gun. So that's pretty much my answer. It depends where you are trading at the moment. I think Jason Taumalolo's scores are facaded with the fact that we're expecting less minutes. Another question I got from Code Delta was about Hess. Do I trade him out now? What do I do? I got him when he was cheap. Do we look at getting rid of him? No. No way. The fact that Hess is now starting, he's starting at the second row, means he's back to being good enough to hold and to keep. I wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to buy him if you're one of those people because he could necessarily just jump back into the bench at any time. So I wouldn't be going out of my way to kind of grab him. But if you're holding on to him, he's definitely not a sell just yet. His break-even's 44 points. He will most likely hit that. And he's been scoring well, other than the round that he got, you know, the concussed against the Rabbitohs. You know, 53, 80, 49, 74. All those points again. Some of those points, again, you don't expect him to play 80 minutes, but he did because of injury. And that's what's happening with some of these teams, like the Jared Wallaces and the Coen Hess. They're playing excessively minutes just because of the injuries that are happening. It's just the way fantasy works sometimes. But I definitely hold Hess. Until Hess goes back to the bench, I think he's a keeper for now, so hold on to him. Another question I received from Chewy was, when do you start planning for buy rounds? What's it all about? What's going on? Buys. Now, he's obviously talking about the State of Origin period that happens between round 12 to about round 19, I believe, where you've got to have guys playing in those particular teams in order to cover yourself to play 17 men or as many people as you can. Because at the end of the day, if you have a lot of players that are, for example, playing for Manly, and if you look at the buy schedule right here, that they're not going to be playing round 12, and that's one of the major buy rounds, you're going to be screwed because you're going to have 10 players playing against someone who might have 17, 16, 15 players. And it's also weighed up on the quality of the players that you're holding. If you have garbage players just for buy coverage, that's not good. Like, The guys you should be looking out for are the three teams playing in round 12 and round 15. Effectively, the two of the three major bye rounds, the first two major bye rounds, and those are South Sydney Rabbitohs, Parramatta players, and also Cronulla Sharks players. How do you easily facilitate a way to look at the players that you can potentially get that are going to be scoring well? Well, if you roll at the stats center, like I'm doing right now, and you simply click Eels, Sharks, and also Rabbitohs, you can see who are the guys who are scoring excessively well. Now, Paul Gallen, for me, is great bye coverage. He's declared last year that it was his last State of Origin game, and I hope he's going to honour that because I'm thinking about picking him up in the next round. I'll get to my trades a little bit later. Cody Walker would also be great. Andrew Fifita, no. When you've got these guys that are effectively playing State of Origin, which we think Andrew Fifita will, he will miss 5 games. He'll miss the 2 major bye rounds because he'll be playing Origin, and then he'll be missing the lesser bye rounds because his team doesn't play in around 13, and also I think it's 16 for the Sharks. But either way, the whole point there is that if they're playing State of Origin and they're going to be missing more than 3 games, you might even think about potentially trading them out, pulling in a gun, and then pulling them back in at the later part of the season. A good person to look at for that example is my boy, Joshy Maguire, who the Broncos have the first bye round on round 12. He doesn't play because he has State of Origin, but then he also misses out round 13, and then you'd imagine he'd miss the next bye round and also the one after that. So that's going to be a bit of a crux. But the guys you're looking out for, your Sammy Burgesses, your James Graham, your Paul Gallens, your guys who are effectively going to be doing that. Another one is Nathan Brown. He's somehow stuck his way into the lock position for Parramatta. Scored really well on the weekend, got 60 points with the additional try that he got. But he's going back to playing 60 to 68 to 58 minutes in the last 3 games, and that looks like he's going to be doing that from here on after. He'd be great because he's part of the one team that misses all the major buys. So he'd be a great buy for you if you think he's going to do excessively well. The problem is he's really awkwardly priced. He's not quite a gun yet because 400,000 is like top tier mid-range, and you don't just want to be buying mid-range players if they're not going to be exceedingly making you money either, because you just want guns. And I think it could potentially be a bit of a waste of a trade, but I know some people are going to be jumping on him because he's only 1%, so he'd be a great pod if you think he's going to be keeping his role at lock and doing that. But at the moment, there's not enough evidence to suggest that just yet. Anything could happen with that team, so I'm a little bit skeptical to kind of jump on him just yet, even if I wanted to. But the other thing is, I have a great second and front row that I really don't want to touch at the moment. The other thing, we'll look at next week is a bit of a buy planner that you guys can download from one of the various social media sites. So I'm hoping to cover the social media sites and you guys to assist you guys in making you the better fantasy coaches by doing that next week. But who are the major trades that I'm doing this week? So I'm doing a complete crazy move, and I'm bringing in Blake Leary, who has less than 1%. Now, he has been named hooker for the Cowboys in the absence of Jonathan Thurston, who Ben Hampton was playing hooker and now is going to half, and also the absence of Jake Granville. So I'm bringing in Blake Leary for Lukey Yates. And the reason why I'm bringing him in is because Yates has been named the 19th man. He also has a weird break-even of 19 points. Now, even if he does get on the bench, which I don't know if that's going to be the case moving forward, he might be able to sneak on the bench a few more times. I don't expect him to start. He might score as low as 20, 23 points and then go up by like 3k, 4k. So for me, it's a trade. It's just a black and white trade. I need to get rid of him. I need to either upgrade him to a gun or cash him out and get someone who might potentially be a Cashie, or just cash him out, period. And Blake Leary fits that description perfectly. I've gone over in my last video that if I could have a whole team of players of one position, they'd be all hookers. Now, Blake Leary might only play 50 minutes. I'm looking at the Cowboys team at the moment, the 17-man, and I just can't see a hooker. I can't see a utility hooker on the bench other than Blake Leary. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to play 80 minutes. In fact, I don't expect him to, because traditionally the Cowboys have never played an 80-minute hooker unless there's an injury that happens on the field at that time. So for me, I'm expecting him to play 50 minutes, possibly a little bit more, 55. I think Blake Leary could be good for, 30, 40 points. So I'm going to be, you know, banking on him to play in my second front row, put him in there in my starting team even, and kind of be doing a bit of a pod where everyone else that I've got in my second front row, you know, Jack DeBellin, 15% owners, Sammy Burgess, 33%. So I'm kind of cashing out Luke Yates for a bottom basement price second rower who's technically playing in the hooker role for at least, you know, 40 to 50 minutes, we're hoping, and doesn't get injured. So he might only play 3 games, and in 3 games, he might go up 50 to 60k. If he does score about the 30 mark and plus, I'm expecting him to go up by 60k. The problem there is it's a high-risk situation because Thurston could come back in 2 weeks. He can come back in 3 weeks. Jake Granville could come back in 3 and 4 weeks. So I'm willing to cash out Luke Yates, and I'm just accepting the fact that it's a bonus if Blake Leary, not Luke Leary, what? If Blake Leary actually makes me money and I can eventually trade him out. So great starting cash out for Luke Yates. It puts a lot more money in my kitty at the moment, $464,000. I need to be able to spend that. I'm actually looking to spend that next round because I think Frankie Winterstein is necessarily going to edge himself out very shortly, if not for Curtis Sironen. Now, I really like Sironen, but he's starting to get to his, you know, his peak price, break even of 23. We know he's done worse than that before, but he's doing a really good job. As long as he keeps scoring 40s, he's going to stay in there. But once he starts to peak, I'm actually going to trade him to probably Paul Gallen, and that's because buys, purely buys. Manly don't play around 12 and 15, so that goes back to the whole buy perception of how it operates. But so far, so good for my team. I'm expecting better things from Corey Norman. Also, Jamal Idris, again, that's a weighted trade that might be reversed. As for my captain, I honestly haven't decided yet. I don't know who I'm going to pick. I might announce that just before the game. What I'm hoping for, if we are looking for him to play on the Friday night, which he is against South, if it rains, I might even captain Sam Burgess. I might even captain James Graham. It really depends upon that bench as well, the 1 hour before. If the Bulldogs, you know, name a utility on the bench again and Frawley becomes the 17th man rather than the 20th man, I think I'm actually going to bring him in. I think I'm going to captain him once again to see what he can do. The other big trade, I guess, that everyone's talking about is Angus Crichton playing in the second row. He played 80 minutes last week, got 78 points, did an exceptionally great job for his owners of just less than 2%. Break even, -3. So he's definitely going to go up in money. All he needs to do is just take the field and get injured in the first minute, and he'd still make you money. Not that that will likely happen, but we've seen that happen before to Greg Inglis a couple of years ago. But Rabbitohs, great buy coverage. The only thing I'm worried about is the inconsistency of Madge, their coach, and their front row and second row rotation. Angus Crichton might come back and only play 50 minutes next week, then score 30, and then score 30 again, and then, I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. That team has been so inconsistent in its front and second rows. I mean, Georgie Burgess is barely getting any game time. At the same time, his brother Tommy Burgess isn't getting any game time. Zane Musgrove was nearly benched the other week. I don't know. It's a scary thought to kind of consider, but I'm just not going to hold on to him for now. I mean, I'm not going to be trading him in. I'd be wary of that. Take a risk. If you're willing to go for a pod, a Cashie pod who might make you some money and also have great buy coverage, Angus Crichton is your man. So, hats off to you guys that do that. The other trades I'm looking to do is Aubusson eventually into my centers, because he's, second row, center, dual position. And that's because Joseph Manu has been named over Latrell Mitchell. And the whole basis there is that they have a backup center. So even if Joseph Manu or Blake Ferguson got injured, Latrell Mitchell would probably come into the side. Plus, Aubusson's playing an amazing role in that team at the moment as we're speaking, that I don't think they could take him out of the second row even if they wanted to. And my last question I'm going to be answering is, I got a question from Ryan McLaughlin, who was talking about Jesse Bromwich, about trading him out. He's held him this whole time. Bromwich hasn't stepped up. He looked really out of place last week, if not the week before. I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's just coming back and he's having a bad time, or his broken thumb is affecting him more than what we can see or what meets the eye. And that's the problem. When a player is effectively carrying a niggle, is it getting in the back of their mind? Is it a mental thing? Is it that he doesn't want to go in as hard? Is he, is the coach not looking to play him for as many minutes to kind of preserve him? He's very cheap at the moment, 353k, which is ridiculously cheap. It's so cheap. I mean, for Jesse Bromwich, a player like him, the fact of the matter is his break-even's 52, and he hasn't broken that once. Now, am I advising people to trade him out? I'd consider it because he's just not performing as well. And I don't like to trade a gun for a gun, but Kenneth Bromwich, as you can see on my screen right now, is actually almost as much money as he is, even though he's, you know, playing a little bit more minutes than him. That's the scary thing. When a gun just isn't performing, then you start to get into a phase where you need to look at other alternatives and if it's worth holding. I'd considering moving him to Whitehead, Elliott Whitehead at the moment, who's also around the same price tag, because we know that Elliott Whitehead is genuinely much cheaper than what he deserves to be, because he played centre at the start of the year and went down in price significantly. He went down 131k. I don't think Elliott Whitehead is a top 17 player. I think he's a great mid-range cash option in order to pull you up, but also someone who's definitely going to be scoring well. Now, we did get 55 with the assistance of scoring a try, and I was a little bit surprised by the fact that he didn't score that well when he was playing on the same edge as Jordan Rapana and Joey Leilua, and that's where all the action seems to be. So I'm actually holding off a trade on Elliott Whitehead myself, because I don't want to get caught with my pants down and him not playing as well as he had. Now, I don't think that's going to be the case, but I just think that the Blake Leary trade for me is way more substantial. Other people talking about Corey, CHN, China, if you want to say it as an acronym out loud. But Corey is an interesting one because now he's been benched, and we spoke about that last week with the injuries. Is he worth it? If you picked him up last week, good on you, because he made 56k, and we know he's going to be making more money because his break-even's negative 18. So, even if he plays on the bench, he could still get 40 minutes and still get 35 to 40 points and get you the job done for the day. But I wouldn't be trading him in now. I think that has sailed because he's played the 3 games, and although he's going to be going up more money, I don't think he's going to be scoring as well. So that's something for you to consider if you're looking at bringing him in. Surprisingly, he's only 25% still only own him, so that was a big surprise to me. The other thing we should look at is the rankings. Who is ranked number 1 at the moment? How far are we behind them? We're ranked now 4,226, so we went up by about 3,000 to 4,000 ranks last round. It's because of the score that we got 923. A couple of big scores came out last week. A lot of people fired. A lot of the guns fired. I mean, if you held Jordan Rapana, you got like 100 and something points, which is the first time that's ever been broken. And I guess a lot of people are going to ask me, would I look at trading him in? My answer is no. Don't go trading in Rapana while he's currently priced at a ridiculous price. If you've missed the boat, you've missed the boat. Like, it's that simple. He's like 540k. I wouldn't be touching him. But in saying that, if you're owning him, continue to do so. So let's have a look at the number 1 guy at the moment, Brett Smith, Super Troopers, with STS, if you might want to call him short, because it looks like he's capitalized the S for Super, Trooper T, and a capital S at the end for Super Troopers. So look at his team. Andrew McCullough, great pickup for him, because at the end of the day, Nikamura is not playing in the utility role on the bench, which we thought he was going to be stealing minutes, or because Benny Hunt got injured. The other thing I want to point out there is, will Anthony Milford play bigger minutes as a result? Or not bigger minutes, but get more ball possession? I think so. I think he could be a potential trade. I might even look at trading him next week for Riley Jacks. So there you go. Isaac Luke. Luke's been playing okay. I mean, he's averaging 36 at the moment. It seems to be a little bit up and down, but, you know, there is a weakness in itself. Jared Wallace, look, we've been speaking about this guy for so long. He's been lucky to play the minutes that he had because of the way he'd been scoring, was because of the injuries in his team, and now that he played genuinely 48 minutes, which is what he'd probably only play anyway, guess what? He scores 38 points. So I'd even consider trading him out. His break-even's 37. He might have one good more round in him. Paul Vaughan, great pickup. Jared Warrior-Hargreaves, 10% own him, and 10% owners have benefited from the 49k that he's brought in. Kikai has he played at all this season? Yeah, he's been playing a couple of games, but he's currently not in the team. He's not doing that great of a job. I mean, he made 19k, but he's basement price. Lukey Yates is out. Papali, great pickup. Sammy Burgess, Wade Graham. Soliola, I don't think is going to be able to maintain the price tag that's on him. So we're looking through this guy's team. You know, he captained Sean Johnson. Sean Johnson got 44 points. So this guy's obviously showing a little couple of weaknesses here. He's also got Jai Field, who isn't playing for the rest of the year as far as I'm concerned, and Kane Elgie. He's centers Walker and Kotrick, so he's been a little bit lucky with Kotrick scoring as well as he has. His back line is really good. Tedesco, Tuivasa-Sheck, and Trbojevic. Can we catch him? That is the main question. I think, yeah. I think, you know, we're only in round 6. Got so many more rounds to go. What's it, like 20 more rounds to go? That's a lot of rounds. A lot of buys that we've got to consider. He's less than... Ooh, just less than 500 points. So he's significantly above anyone else. And he's averaging 850 points a game, which is really good for him. It's also brought up his team value. That's the funny thing about fantasy, is that the spoils always go to the victor. So if you're doing, your team's doing well, your team's obviously going to be more value. So you've got better trades to be able to make. So the stronger get stronger while the weaker get weaker. But we might just wrap this video up. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate all the questions that come in. I love the fact that you guys are parading me with all your YouTube questions as well, and I'm answering them one by one. I'm really happy for everyone who jumped on the Ben Hampton Express with me last week. I hope that you do this week as well, and I hope that if you do, that he even scores even better. I reckon we should have a fantasy meetup for drinks. I don't know if it's going to be this Friday. It might work out because it's Easter, but I might post something down below, something in the western suburbs of Sydney around the Sydney Olympic Park, Homebush area for a catch-up with drinks and all fantasy people. I'll just do an open invite and see who actually wants to come. I might do that through Facebook as an event on my Spot the Aussie Facebook page. So if you haven't liked it, be sure to like it. And yeah, we'll see if there's any fantasy nuts that want to kind of catch up and go from there. But thanks so much for the support, guys. Be sure to subscribe. Really appreciate all the support and love. Hoping for another 900 plus score, and I'm hoping you guys do even better next week. And I'll check you guys out soon. Whoosh.